I'm going to tell you a quick story about a friendship. It was my second year of high school, and all I could do was think about, man, I could really use like a lot of money right now. So on a weekend, I walked all around town applying to any and every job I could. I knew I wanted a flexible job working Sundays, Mondays, and Wednesdays specifically so that it wouldn't take up so much time in my school day. Pretty quickly after I turned in my application, I got hired as a front-end cashier at the Rochester People's Food Co-op. So basically I was just working the cash register, checking people out every day. However, this new routine proved to be maybe a little bit too much for me at the time. I think I bit off more than I could chew, and adjusting was not the easiest experience. And my homework very quickly started to pile up, and as my homework piled up, I got more stressed over work, and then I kind of started drowning in responsibilities. Fortunately, the more I worked, the better I got to know my coworkers, and the best of all my coworkers, the coolest, was Ray. He was a 60-something-year-old late-stage hippie who knew everything there was to know about produce, and he was more than willing to help me out and get adjusted to my new job. As it turned out, too, we had very similar schedules, so Sunday, Monday, and Wednesday, we worked together. And when I came into work having a bad day, he was able to cheer me up pretty good. So it worked out pretty nice. And of course, everybody has bad days. So when Ray came in looking somber and pretty beat up, I did my best to help him focus on the positive so that our job wasn't as soul-crushing. And evidently, as we became better friends, work became less of a chore. It stopped feeling like work. It was more time to just like chit-chat and catch up, and it got in the way of like us actually working, but it was fun. But eventually after working, it was time for a much needed vacation. So for 3 weeks in June, I planned to go visit my grandmother with my brother, and I told Ray that I would bring back some sort of souvenir for him. But in all honesty, the flight from the States to Scotland was actually awful, so uncomfortable. We had like a 7-hour layover in Dublin, and it was just like taking naps in the benches of a Burger King. And when we were flying, we were packed in like sardines in the very back of the plane. But it was all worth it because I hardly ever get to see my grandma, and I love her, and she's so nice. After flying all the way across the Atlantic Ocean for the 3 weeks that I was spending in Scotland, I very much enjoyed my time. My grandma lives in a little village near the beach, so every now and then I'd go down past some pastures of cows, and I'd go and skip little rocks on the beach. And then after I was done with that, I would go home and I would eat a bunch of candy, and then I would go rummage through all my dad's old CDs. But for the first like week and a half of the trip, I couldn't stop wondering what the heck I was going to get Ray for a souvenir. So I thought long and hard about it, and I decided what's better than getting him a little postcard. That was my very bright idea. So on a rainy day, I made my grandma drive me into town to find a really good postcard. Like I looked for a really long time in a bunch of charity and gift shops, and I finally settled on a postcard of the town that I was looking in. And it was called Stonehaven, and I thought Ray would really like it. The biggest problem I faced after buying the actual postcard was figuring out just exactly what I was going to write on it, because I didn't have a whole piece of paper to pour my heart out onto. I just had a 3x5 inch little postcard. That's it. So because of the limited space, I decided to write down kind of just 3 of my favorite memories working with him. So I wrote down how I missed playing puzzles with him, like the New York Times connections, and we would spend whole shifts scratching our heads trying to figure out the purple category first. And then I mentioned how Scotland is in a horrible dad joke deficit, and how I only kind of sort of miss the dad jokes that he always had because I rolled my eyes every time. I also recounted our love for similar artists like Brian Eno, David Bowie, and even though we both really did not like his voice, Bob Dylan's writing is too good not to listen to. And I ended off my postcard with a quick thank you to Ray, just saying how much easier work is having a friend there. And with that, I put a stamp on the card and went over to mail it at the drugstore. Unfortunately, I was unaware that sending cards overseas costs £1.30, so I had to run and get that. And about a week after the postcard was sent, I said goodbye to my grandma, and we flew back to the States. And I was a little worried that I would get home before the card would, but I packed some extra chocolate just in case that actually happened. To my surprise, when I returned back to work, Ray met me with a big smile and he was holding my postcard in his hand. And I was very glad to know that he thought my card was just so great. Fast forward to August 2025, as I'm about to leave for school, on my last day of work, Ray gives me two sweaters, vintage by the way, from his own personal collection, and needless to say, they are now my prized possessions. Now, having made such a good friend at work, I look forward to going back every time I'm in town. And if it weren't for Ray, I think I would have quit the People's Food Co-op long, long ago. Anyway, if there's any one thing I learned from all that, it's to make sure your friends know that they're appreciated because they'll appreciate you for it too. But that's it. Have a good day.